Okay, now we're at the end of the expansion phase and it's time to count. Now, normally you'd count each of the little white tokens, but because this is the first turn of the game and nobody lost their initial place, I can do this kind of easily. Now he's at 6. They're not. He's at 6. 6. So we've got 3 people in potential contention. Barcelona, Hamburg, and Venice. Well, who gets it? And there is tie for this, broken by order of play. So whichever one was first. Well, Hamburg has the earliest order of play position out of the people who had 6. So he gets a bonus card, which he gets to look at and say, that's kind of interesting. It's a ban on acquiring new advances in either science, religion, or exploration. And an interesting little thing where you can maybe slow down things, especially if you've gotten Overland East and nobody else has. It tends to be useful there, or perhaps on the commerce to prevent other people. Paris, you might prevent from getting a caravan by doing this, and thereby extend his own time with dominance. Okay, well now, what we're going to do is essentially, we have to flip all of these. So let's take a look at it. So Barcelona gains a couple of wool, and I'd mark that like this. And I'm going to be doing that with each of them, right? They gain a metal. And that gets marked here. They grab a silk. This doesn't give them anything, but it does become established. They gain a stone. And that's the extent of what they gained. And I'm going to do that for everyone. And then I'll come back and roll the shortage and surplus. And see what happens in terms of the effect of that. Okay, so I've flipped all the counters and positioned all the different commodities where people hold them. We can see Venice has mostly succeeded with their cloth gall. They didn't manage to push down to where they can get it from Tunis, so they're probably not going to delay, and they're going to play their cloth card and get their 45 bucks or whatever this next turn. Other people are trying to proceed with their own goals here. It's kind of tough because some of the cards, the only other one I remember was Barcelona's Silk, and they really don't have an option to improve that. The question is, do they want to pull $8 for that card, or can they expand into one of these two areas next turn? That's something they have to try to figure out. Right now their shipping capacity isn't very high, but they can start moving along the North African coast to get into striking distance of Salonika. Of course, before they can get there, Venice is going to be there, and that's something they have to realize and try to plan for. What if they get the Heavens? Well, the Heavens cost them 30. That's a lot of cash to throw in. Now, they saved a little bit. They can probably manage it. That would allow them to sail 1, 2, 3, 4, and start making operations right in Greece itself. There's a good chance that they'll try to do that, and maybe even buy, they'd have to buy a ship upgrade as well, because right now they could just go 1, 2 to Sicily if they had the Heavens. Nice advantage, but they want more than that. But if they have that much range, they might be desiring to strike all kinds of other stuff. Silk, their one card is nice, but they got another one here. They got a metal card. And they'd like to score that too. Both are driving them towards the Aegean, though, as opposed to anywhere else. All right, let's start looking at what we have here. We have the shortage and surplus. I'm going to use the black and white die to determine the commodity, and a high number will be a surplus. So I got a surplus in 5. 5 is grain. A surplus in that, nobody has a bonus in it. Basically, if a grain card was played, it would have no effect because everybody has just one commodity there. Nobody has to pay a penalty for it, though. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to hand out the cash. Everybody collected their income which is listed here, and I should hand that cash out before I roll these because you pay your penalty out of them. But for example, Barcelona is going to give 51 bucks. People who expanded less, I think the worst here are 4s, will only get 39 bucks. Let's roll these two. I'll hand out the cash. And then what's going to happen is people get to make their bids. So this one's also a 5, and this one's a shortage, so they actually cancel out, and there's no effect on grain. Since nobody has a clear majority of any of the resources, there's no tiebreaker on this, so nobody has to pay the penalty or gain the advantage. In this case, I'm not with the canceling out. I don't know. I don't think either one would have come into play. Okay, so now I'm going to hand out the cash, and people are going to make their bids. The stirrups card goes away, and that goes away forever because it's square. That won't come back into the deck. The war card does not go away. That's still in play. There's still a war between Paris and Hamburg. Until somebody wins that war, it's going to keep going. Well, what else do we have? All right, so yeah, I'll hand out the cash based on these, and then people make a bid how many tokens they want to buy for next turn. And it works the same way as it did in the first one. However many tokens you buy affects what your order of play is going to be. So you've got to kind of figure out what you actually want to pay for. Not just in terms of what advances you want to make, but where you want to go in the turn order. Okay, so all the selections for the next turn have been made. Let's talk a little bit about the decision making here. London bid a big 12 counters. Basically what they're looking at is the fact that they have this Overland East possibility moving over into the Baltic, and for doing that they're going to need to improve their boat and maybe get the Heavens and try to shift over as fast as possible. That's kind of their desire here, and it might not be a bad one given that Paris seems to be playing around in the London natural market. This is a more valuable area and gets them access to the other riches in the East too, which is very tempting. Paris bid low. With the war out there, they want to buy things like nationalism, and they can expand here in the British Isles. There's not a lot else open to them. They've been kind of sealed off by Hamburg. Now they can sail and maybe get through here or something, but right now what they're looking at is, if I bid low, I can grab a few things, get a little cash, and maybe win this war. But they're probably going to end up in a two-sided war by their fear, or two-fronted war against both London and Hamburg. That's their real fear here. Who's next? How about Barcelona? They bid a big 20 counters, and their goal here also is to buy. They had a lot of money, so they have actually 42 bucks left over, which is about as much as anyone else has. Only London has more, 43. Their plan is to get shipping and move out and try to get towards the silk as quickly as possible and that metal over in Constantinople, and try to make their cards more valuable to them. The next one up is Genoa, who bid 17 counters. They only are holding a stone card, which they may well just play. Holding it for the extra, to try to get an extra 5 bucks. Right now they produce 4. And if they could get it up, if they could get to Vienna, but that's not going to be easy. They don't have caravans yet, and they don't really want to buy them. It's easier just to get rid of the card, get a few bucks, share with poor Paris, and try to move down into here. And that's where their goal is right now. Over to Venice. Venice spent 13 on counters. They're planning on playing their cloth card, as I mentioned. They have the armor. They were thinking about going to war with that. They may or may not, because they do have some openings to get down to the silk here. They may be able to get a boat down and get it all the way to the grain here. But they're kind of worried they might find themselves in competition. And if they grab these things early, Genoa will have a harder time taking them from them. They're not sure which way they're going. They were actually thinking about advancing into the metal and gold up here, which they see as kind of valuable, and using the armor card to help them get that advance. They want to get that out of their hand because it's negated by longbow or gunpowder. I believe it's turned into what's called an unplayable misery burden. And what that means is you have to hold the card, you're not allowed to play it, and you have to pay either misery or money to keep it every turn. And that's an annoyance that one would rather not have. Better to get the thing out of your hand for no good, so they'll probably be playing it and try to take advantage maybe of an attack here or there, or the defensive at-J that it grants. What about here with Hamburg, the final choice? They only bought 14 tokens, which isn't a lot, but if you look at the pricing, that actually puts them in the bottom half of people. The race to the bottom has begun. This is something that's interesting in the game. People start to get the feeling that, geez, I only bid 12 tokens and I'm still going late in the order. How low do I have to bid to get an early play? And there's sort of at some point it's so low that it's just not worth going early. But then you make the decision of, fine, if I have to bid 6 and I'm only going to go kind of in the middle of the pack, the hell with it, I'll bid 30. I'll buy as many tokens as I have. And you can actually bid more tokens, like you can bid less than 0, you can bid more tokens than you have to guarantee yourself a later position in the turn. Why you would want to do that, I'm not sure, because it's almost invariably better to go early in the turn. But there may be cases where you don't. Anyway, let's take a look at the Hamburg player. They have 14 tokens. They're planning on playing the Papal Decree, I believe, to prevent anyone else from getting Caravan. They're going to ban commerce. Oh, they may not be allowed to. Right? Only science, religion, and exploration. They can't ban commerce. Well, they'll probably end up banning something just to get the card out of their hands. It may depend on what they draw. Maybe they'll ban religion in order to prevent somebody from getting patronage on a leader that they want to play. We'll see. They're going to play kind of late in the turn. And let's see what their goal was. They too were looking at moving eastward to try to get towards that Overland East option, although they don't have a definite benefit from it. Both Paris and Hamburg are kind of not too interested in conflict anymore. Hamburg's managed to wall Paris off. That's all they wanted to do. Paris doesn't particularly want to fight hard over those big areas. They're seeking their fortune westward now. It's kind of an interesting situation because the way the mechanics of the game work, you usually don't really want to compete with people, and you certainly don't want to do it in the kind of areas that Hamburg has put as barriers. However, there is still this war in place, and that's not a pleasant effect. Don't you love car alarms? Okay. And yes, unlike some people, I don't edit. So, all right. Let's take a look at what this means on the order of play. And looking at the quick chart, Paris bid the least at 8, so they're going to be going first. Looks like London, Venice, and then Hamburg. London, Venice, then Hamburg with quick succession there, right? 12, 13, 14. And then we're at Genoa at 17 and Barcelona at 20. Genoa and Barcelona. And Barcelona's kind of kicking themselves, although they kind of bought as many tokens as they think they can with the money they're going to have. But it always sucks when you're number 6. And if you did it with 20, well, maybe you could have gotten away with, 30, whatever. There's always this kind of depressing effect on your bids based on, I want to go earlier in the turn. And when you realize, hey, I got last and I could have bid a lot more counters for that, it always kind of makes you feel like you should have bid more. In this case, I'm not so sure, but Barcelona was somewhat hoping that they would get an earlier slot, like 5th. 20's a lot of tokens at this point in the game, though, and they were the only ones with a ton of money. So It's not too surprising. This one's going to load up, and then we'll start on turn 2.